My name is Matthew Wildman. I was 17 in 1985 and I was just becoming a loyal fan for Bradford City.
Love strange, surreal in the dark. Think of the tender things that we were working on.
It was my first full year watching Bradford City, and of course all we did is watch them win and become champions of the division.
Don't you forget about me. Don't.
And those are joyous scenes at Valley Parade.
Will you stand above me? Look my way, never love me. Rain keeps falling down.
Sometimes you can wait years and years for a team to do something special. I was lucky enough to see them do something special in the first year. It was a very, very special occasion. We were there about midday just to lap up the atmosphere. There was four of us. One of my friends, Adrian Bell, had gone into a different part of the ground, but I was sat there with two very special friends, still very special friends to this day, Andrew Farrell and Andrew Scythe. It's as if the sunshine had been ordered for the day. It was a really glorious sunny day. I shouted out and threw myself over the wall.
Human beings seeing human beings in trouble.
It was total mayhem to be honest.
There were people just everywhere.
You never forget something like that.
We were the lucky ones.
It's a catastrophe.
Probably the worst day ever. I think that's how you can describe it, the worst day ever. The following day, on the Sunday, we had a charity football match which was going to be played at Valley Parade in aid of the Lord Mayor's appeal. And on the afternoon of the fire, I was in the ground selling tickets for the game, trying to get supporters and spectators to come along and watch it. My name's Ben Hannay, and I was a firefighter on Red Watch at Bradford Central Fire Station on the day of the Bradford City fire.
The copper singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." It's supposed to be Liverpool's anthem, but Bradford have adopted it for this very special day.
Bradford normally play to about 5,000 people. Today there's 11,000. A big celebration day.
Well, I shouldn't have been working, for starters. I'd swapped my shift because a fellow inspector had babysitting problems. Terry Slocum, that's Sierra Lima Oscar, Charlie Oscar Mike Bravo Echo. And that's me. The day was a joyous day. It was a day of celebration.
Norman Glover of Chorley is no stranger to this ground, but he isn't the scheduled referee. That should have been done short of Sandbach. Away we go then, with Lincoln in blue kicking from right to left.
We've always lived around the area. You know, I was brought up as a kid in Birkinshaw, which is, well, it's not far at all from Bradford. I'm Neil Redfern, and in 1985 I was playing for Lincoln City. My dad obviously played for Bradford City.
McGinley will leave it for Neil Redfern here, whose father Brian used to play here at Bradford City and is in fact in the crowd today.
A teammate, he got stretchered off, Steve Collins.
And on the centre circle, as you see, an injury there to Steve Collins.
Corner came in and there was a scramble on the goal line, and I think John fell on Steve's leg and, and he ended up with, I think he broke his leg or he fractured it or something. So he had to go to Bradford Infirmary, to get it sorted.
And it does indeed mean that Lincoln City, in the early minutes of this game, are going to have to introduce their substitute.
It was a quite equal game. We were actually playing okay.
Baird delivers another good-looking cross, and that's the best effort we've seen so far. It was Gordon Hobson who was coming in and just toe-ended it over the bar.
I was basically here in a garden shed. That's what we had in those days. It really was a boring game. Nothing happened. 0-0. Both teams, you would never say that they were happy to get a 0-0 draw, but we'd had the presentation, so the main business of the day had already been done. Let's get the season over with. Let's see this match out. If somebody gets a goal and wins it, that's absolutely fine. But really, there had been very, very few incidents until the moment that the fire started.
There's the long cross, and Felgate makes a very good catch with Hawley in the area and Henry there too.
There was nothing special about the game. It was after the Lord Mayor's show.
And he's got a good cross into that far side as well. McGinley, the tall fella's up there, and Bobby Campbell kicks it almost into the centre of Bradford.
Lincoln City played their part. First half was boring. I mean, there's nothing really very much at stake, and it went from boring to horror in seconds.
As far as his opposite number, Redfern, and skids straight through to the hands.
Clubs could wear advertising, but when it was on TV, the advertising had to be smaller. And after 5 or 10 minutes of play, I noticed that the advertising on Lincoln City's shirts was not the TV size. They were wearing shirts that had big advertising. So I went round to the main stand and I spoke to the secretary of Bradford City and said, "Where's the chairman of Lincoln City?" "Well, he's in the director's box." So I walked around down the steps and said to him, "You're wearing the wrong shirts." And he said, "Well, we haven't got any other shirts." So I went back to the secretary's office, which was in the corner of the stand, and said, "Can I use your phone?" I rang a colleague of mine and he said, "Well, there's not a lot you can do, is there?" And I said, "Well, no, exactly." And I put the phone down and the secretary said to me, "I can just see some smoke coming from the corner of the stand at the other end." And I said, "Oh yeah, well, I can see something." And my first thought was, I better get back to the scanner, to the OB truck, and tell the director, Peter Jones, that there's some smoke coming out of that corner.
I can remember Peter Jones, the director, was in the scanner on the Midland Road side at the back of this, what is now a stand, but back of my garden hut. And I remember I was facing across here, and just across there, I think it was Stuart McCall was taking a throw-in. And with the naked eye, I just saw a little glow. And we have a thing called a lazy talk back key, and I just said to Peter Jones, "Jonesy, can you just hone in behind McCall taking the throw-in?"
Redfern's the defender in front of him. Withers gone outside. Campbell trying to nudge the ball through from McCall. Well picked out by Shipley.
I was sat roughly where I'm sat here now, 3 rows behind and 3 seats away from where the fire actually started. My name's Lee Duxbury. I played for Bradford City, apprentice in 1985-86. I remember smoke coming, and it's like, oh, it was a bit odd to start with. I'm thinking, where's that smoke coming from?
I was very close to where the fire started in the main stand on the back row, near to where the turnstiles were locked. And because everyone was enjoying themselves so much, it's as if we all couldn't tune into the fact that something was wrong. So even when people were being told that there is a fire and they need to move, it just took everyone what seemed like an age to take it on board and actually start to do something.
Just before half time, I'd gone into the police control room to just put the kettle on, to be honest, make a pot of tea. And as I'm putting the kettle on, a policeman came in and quite nonchalantly said, "You'll be needed in a minute, there's a fire down the far end of the stand." And I ran, because that's what firefighters did. They run towards a fire. And I don't know how long it had taken me, 13-14 seconds maybe, but by the time I got there, the fire was blazing.
I'd been in probably 2 or 3 minutes, and I heard words to the effect, I thought it said pitch invasion. So I went out onto the ground and I started walking in front of the stand, and I could see some sort of movement further on, and 1 or 2 people were walking towards me. Glenn Leeson was in the stand, one of my bobbies, and I could see a little bit of smoke. Didn't think a great deal about it, but as I got closer I could see that Glenn was trying to move people away. The smoke was getting worse.
A few people moving about and everything, and there was a puff of smoke, and obviously the game was going on, and then all of a sudden you saw people start tumbling over the stand and getting, onto the pitch, and that's when you realise something else is happening.
I'm down at the far end down there, and then people started coming onto the pitch down there. We thought we were like a pitch invasion, a little bit of trouble.
There was a ball that got knocked out, and I think I was shepherding it out or trying to play it back to the keeper, Dave Falgate. He basically just cleared it into the stand, and as I turned and watched the ball go into the stand, I could just see parts of the fire starting to take shape.
And we've actually got a fire in the stand on the far side of the ground, and that looks very nasty indeed.
It was just a tiny little fire, and those were my words. There appears to be, sending a shudder up me, there appears to be a small fire in the stand.
It's almost like an out-of-body experience. It happened that quick.
I could see a commotion in the stand, and I remember shouting, calm down, it's just a bit of smoke.
And the police are doing a tremendous job in getting people out of the stand and onto the pitch.
You just backed off because you couldn't get near enough to do any more. And people were moving very slowly but very calmly. There was no panic, and at that time we didn't realise that the fire would spread like it did.
These quite astonishing scenes, and I've just seen the police leading a couple of people out of the ground. And the smoke is now engulfing the pitch at one end. As that blaze grows, the stand has to be in jeopardy.
People then went from thinking they were okay to, to panicking.
And the 2,500 people in that stand are panicking. They are frantic to get out. And these are disastrous scenes for the club. One can feel the heat.
All this was sort of happening in what seemed like a really short space of time.
A minute or two later, I was picking somebody up and throwing them over my shoulder onto the pitch. That's how quick it happened.
It was almost like time stood still sort of thing.
But now that fire is beginning to rage.
Within just a few seconds, the fire erupted. It spread towards the back of the stand and also down, and it spread both ways. And unknown to us, it was spreading under the void in the stand. And the whole stand inside 3 or 4 minutes was just ablaze.
I went down the stairs, I ran down the back of the stand behind the goal and onto the Midland Road, and that's where the TV trucks were. And I pulled open the heavy door of the OB truck, and I looked in, about to say, hey Peter, there's a problem. And every monitor had flames. And that was the most astonishing, awful thing to see. It was terrible.
And then at 3:42, it all kicked off.
We're on fire here at Valley Parade. The whole end of the stand at one side is actually in flames now. I can see the orange of the flames. The game is actually stopped here at Valley Parade.
Unprepared, totally. I wasn't frightened in the Bradford City fire. I should have been, because I was active, I was doing something, I was working.
and they're running out of the ground now from that far end at this moment. And I'm hoping that the police, I can see some policemen's helmets over there, can control this. It looks like there could be a situation of panic, but all the time people are spilling onto the pitch, and we can see the flames going up into the air there. We're getting reports outside that steam is going over, and people are running around. They're running around beside us, they're running around all around us, and people are saying, get onto that pitch. People all the time spilling onto the pitch.
I wasn't burnt, but my knee had turned brown. The jeans I had on, which were light jeans, had turned brown at the front.
The game is stopped. Mickey Bullock, you can see above me. What can you say?
The whole stand is on fire, Tony. It's an absolute, and it's spreading quickly. There's going to be problems, Tony.
I still remember Mickey Bullock's voice saying to me, "It's going to be problems here, Tony. It's going to be problems." We thought it was a smoke bomb. We thought it'd be some crazy football smoke bomb. We hoped the police would sort it out. It wasn't anything like that.
Let's get all those people out of there. Let's get those people. Just take your time. Don't rush. Go down there. Take your time going down there. Don't pull on the wires. Keep the electrics over there. Keep them. Take their time. Don't rush. Don't push. Wait for the kiddies.
It wasn't meant to be a description. It was meant to be a get out. That's what it was meant to be. Get out. Get out. Get safely. Save the kids. Natural instinct for any human being, I would have thought.
People are coming round this. You can hear the heat, the smoke coming everywhere. We are going to have to disconnect very shortly because it really is flaming all the time. We're taking a break. We're getting out of it.
I think there was enough brain in me still left that eventually I had to drop the microphone, and I finished by saying, we're going to take a break. What a stupid thing to say at the end of my commentary piece. We're going to take a break, commercial way of saying we're going to the adverts. It was just to let the studio know they had to cut. Because by then, it wasn't many seconds later, then the equipment would have gone anyway, and I just came over the fence.
Within, I'd say, minutes, it got worse and worse, and then people started moving up the stairs.
Over a year ago, Bradford City lost their floodlights. They were blown over, and now the stand may well be burning down.
We were only kids. I was 17, Andrew Farrell was 14, Andrew Sides was 13. This all just seemed a bit, far-fetched for us. But when we had to move, we moved into the back corridor. The back corridor quickly got filled up because, of course, all the doors were locked. As people started to realise that they had to move away from them, there seemed to be a bit of a stampede going down the corridor. The two young Andrews were taken away from me. I was still struggling to get my crutches because I struggled to walk at that time. And then, of course, the back corridor started to fill up with smoke because we were close to where the fire started, and that's when things started to get a little bit ugly.
And that is a catastrophic sight for Bradford City Football Club. The whole stand is going up in flames.
By the time I walked up and got to the back alley, the flames were literally above us. What do you do?
The smoke was horrific, absolutely. Piles of smoke coming out. And then people started panicking. People crawling over each other to get out, people tumbling over the wall.
I am a short person, so I was under these towering men around me, and when they started to choke from the smoke and people were being jostled in a very thick, heavy crowd, I was pushed down to the floor. That was actually helpful for me because as they were choking on the smoke above me, I could breathe underneath everybody. And then as they started to get affected by the smoke, they dropped onto me and I ended up being covered basically under other bodies on the floor.
It was just impossible to think straight. There were people screaming, people pushing past people. Luckily, there were an entrance to my left to go back into the stand. So I sort of like squeezed into this entrance and started going over the seats and then into the paddock. As you were like looking back and helping people and what have you, you could see, some horrific sights where, people were already trapped at the back.
person who was looking for his son tripped over me and heard that I was having a problem and was able to move people aside and drag me back up, and realised that the only way to escape was to go back through from the top of the stand to the bottom of the stand somehow. So he lifted me and put me back into the stand. That's when I started my journey down the stand to get out.
They came to celebrate the club's promotion to the second division for the first time in 50 years, and now they're running for their lives.
I ran to then under the ground to look to see where my family was, because my family were all sat in the stand up there. My wife was there with me mother and father-in-law had come up from the Midlands, and my daughter was there as well. She was 1.5, and they were right up the other end of the stand. But by that time, the fire had got to about somewhere down here. So I went to the end there. I couldn't see him in the stand, but then instead of going to look for where there was, I started helping some people over the wall, you know, people who were trying to get out. So I remember there was a lady, I grabbed her and pulled her over the wall, and then I helped her with a couple of other people over the wall and that. But then the fire just got that bad. You couldn't stand there. The heat was incredible.
I don't think you realise the magnitude of what was happening. You can't take it in. You just can't take it in. You can't take it in what's happened. Yeah, thinking about it, it's difficult.
I'm fortunate, I think, in that my mind doesn't remember hardly any of it. I got some really nice letters saying thanks for saving me and stuff like that. And I can't remember it at all. I cannot remember picking anybody up and helping them.
I can see my wife and Charlotte in the players' bar. My thought then was to obviously get Charlotte and Alison out of the players' lounge, which I did onto back in Midland Road there. I came back in and then ran back out to look for my dad and my 2 brothers who were in the stand and my father-in-law. I did think my dad and my family and my in-laws had all been affected by the fire. It was about 5 or 6 hours that I knew my dad and my 2 brothers, my father-in-law were actually safe.
There used to be a gap behind the goals, so I went out to the back of the stand and I went down, and obviously there was people all mulling around, and all of a sudden my family came walking down. I met them behind the stand, but unfortunately my father-in-law had come up from the Midlands. He'd exchanged his ticket with somebody, and he was this end of the stand, and we couldn't find him. And for about 3/4 an hour, it was pandemonium. We couldn't find him. Where is he? You know, everybody's worried. And all of a sudden, he come walking down. You know, I'd give him the biggest bollocking he'd ever had in his life. I said, "Where you been?" He says, "I was stuck up that end, but I went up there." And I said, "Oh, great, lovely to see you." So first time I've ever hugged him.
My dad had come to watch. My father-in-law were in the stand. Friends of my parents that had come to the game. You're just hoping that you know they're going to get out okay. But I saw my dad at the top end, and I saw my dad's friend, and then I found out that my father-in-law were all right, and his brother had gone, and he were okay.
My son was in the stand when the fire happened. He was only 4 years old. I thought, God, how am I going to find him? And then I was very fortunate that a young supporter who used to come to the ground quite a lot when we were training, and she'd seen me with Adam, and she knew who he was, and he was wandering around the pitch crying, you know, just have no idea where he was or whatever. And she had the immediate thoughts, and she took him and put him in one of the goal mouths, and she came and found me and took me to him and picked him up. And I know it's selfish, but basically that was me. You know, everything in my world was okay.
I remember being stood out just by the goal mouth there and watching people in the stand, and it was horrible. You know, people couldn't get out. In fact, some people just sat there in the end.
My first memory was there was a guy who was walking down the middle of the stand, and we were trying to get him to come down to us to get him out, and I think he was too far gone. And I remember him falling and knowing he was dead.
You know, you think about your own parents, and think about, you know, your next of kin and your friends and have you. But, you know, there's so many people that were sort of, you know, in the stand. It's difficult, man.
Bradford City is a funny ground in a way, in that the ground is on a certain level, then there's a wall which is only about 2 foot high, but then there's a drop of 5 foot on the other side. So people were coming down and they were having to climb up this 5 foot wall to get over onto the pitch.
My thoughts were try and get as many people out of the stand as you could. So you went to the front of the wall and started pulling people over.
It just got hotter and hotter. And we were pulling people out. Dave Britton's hair caught fire, one of my bobbies. There was a lot of people going up and trying to help and pull people out. My jacket started burning. I lost one lady. I got her part way out and then she slipped back. And it wasn't until later on that I was told that somebody else had got her out. And it wasn't right good.
All you could do was try and help people then who were coming out with burns, with dislocated shoulders, people falling onto the field, not realising. And with the panic, they got into the middle of the field and then the pain would kick in. And all you could do was just try and help people. And we had no water, we had nothing really.
I mean, it wasn't until it were all over you realise what had happened. Especially when the gentleman from Silsden walked out on fire. And I moved down to that bit and then we saw, I think it were 3 people who were stuck in the gents' toilets under the stand. And we went in and got them out and the groundsman was actually pouring water from the toilets over these people to stop them burning. But we got them out and yeah, they're all right.
People in the ground, you didn't know anybody, but people were helping everybody.
One of the biggest problems was getting people out of the ground because of course some people were singing and dancing and thinking this was fun. I can understand why they did it because it was something completely out of the ordinary. And then there were others who were coming up and saying, my son's up there, my wife's up there, I need to go in, and you were saying, no, you can't go, you know.
At first you think, could I have done more? And then you realise, no, I couldn't, to be honest. You did all you could do, but you were just like everyone else, although I'd got a fire service uniform and I had no protective gear.
A particular friend of mine had his son up in the stand and had to virtually tell him where to go to get out. And he said he was going to go in, but we had to stop him.
This is the day that Valley Parade Football Club, the football ground, is burning down.
The staggering statistic for me always is that 4.5 minutes later, the whole lot had gone. Gone. Unbelievable.
Basically, in front of the stand was something called the paddock. And that was a standing area, and there was like an 8-foot drop from the bottom part of the stand into the paddock with a concrete base. So I was confused, wasn't sure what to do, looked down and thought, well, that's no way out. But then I looked down and found that the wall that I was stood in front of, all the paint was bubbling up. And then as I had my hands on the wall, I realised that all the skin on the backs of my hands were bubbling up as well. So it was a case of do something now or never. I shouted out and threw myself over the wall. Thankfully, there was a person called David Hustler who was out on the pitch. He'd rescued loads of people already. He thought he'd finished rescuing people. He thought everybody was out of the fire. He heard my screams and decided that he'd have to do something. So how he managed to leapfrog the outer paddock wall and run across the concrete base and catch me before I hit the floor. He then scrambled us to the outer wall and over and out, and we were the last to get out. Getting people injured like myself out of the ground was a really difficult thing because they couldn't get through the crowd, it was thick. To take me out of the ground, they had to put me on a stretcher and lift me above the crowd, so everybody's passing stretchers over the head. Bearing in mind that all the skin and flesh is hanging off my hands, so I can't really hold on, so I'm being bounced around like this. We then get to the Midland Road side of the ground where the steps are like this, and it's a case of this isn't going to end well. And I get halfway down the steps, and as I anticipated, the stretcher went like that, and off the stretcher I came. So I'm tumbling down again towards these concrete steps, and just before I hit the steps, somebody swooped in and caught me and grabbed me. And it was only a later interview with David, when I was saying I'd love to find out who that person was, that he said, it was me, of course. He basically monitored me all the way out of the ground to make sure that I got to the ambulance safely. And of course he was doing all this with his hands in a really, really horrifically burnt position, but rather than think about himself and get himself off and be treated, he made sure I got out of the ground safely first. He was an amazing individual, and to think that when the chips are down and he'd rescued so many people and he was out of the fire, but there was still someone in there and he could not rest knowing that he had the opportunity. He's told me that he knew when he went back in for me that we weren't getting out, and yet he still did it.
I had it, that was it, because I couldn't leave him.
It just shows that there's some people that have something, an extra X factor. It was the start of a lifelong friendship.